now, please welcome to the stage founder of Black Hat and DEF CON, Jeff Moss.
Hey. Hey. Oh, I always forget to take this off. Hey, thank you for lasting through the whole Black Hat sessions, ending up here in this room with me to help close it down after a closing keynote, something we've never really done before. And who here is, just show of hands, yell out, say something. Has this been a pretty good Black Hat so far? Was it sort of, nobody really knew what to expect because none of us have ever done these hybrid events before. I mean, it's been weird for me, but in a good weird. It seems less like pressurized, like less tension, and it seems more like people are chill and just really having a good time. You guys getting that same feel? Yeah. I wonder if is it the situation we're in, or is it just less people, or is it like self-selection, like we're the people who like have those personality traits and we're here, so it's really extra cool for us. But whatever it is, it's been a really refreshing Black Hat for me. I've really enjoyed it. So thanks for being here for the closing. The remarks from the secretary are fairly short. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just expand a little bit on some of my comments from this morning. Then I want to introduce the secretary. He's going to do his remarks, which are should be interesting. And then I want to have just a couple closing comments, and then see you at the bar or the pool. So let's get started. So this morning I spoke a little bit about my opinion that there's sort of three groups, right? The rule of law countries, the sort of undecided, and the authoritarian countries. And there's a certain amount of gravity, geopolitical gravity, economic, demographic, and then electronic, right? Internet gravity, that's sort of forcing these alignments. And there were a lot of us, myself included, 10 years ago when I was at ICANN, where we'd actively push back, right? We don't want these three groups. We want it to be an open, free, and accessible internet. We don't want this. And there were all kinds of different terms. We would refer to it as a balkanization of the internet, except at ICANN, representing all the internet users of the world, the people from the Balkans didn't like that. They're like, that's a great analogy, but use another one. So then it was like the fragmentation of the internet, it was the splintering of the internet, whatever you want to call it, it's happening. And because of, some of it is because of good intentions, data localization laws, for privacy GDPR, whatever reason, they don't want citizen data, right to be forgotten, or it might be for economic competition. They just want data centers in their country, so they're not all in America. But what you're doing is you're creating these different pools. And the different pools have different attributes. And at about the same time, in the early 2000s, what was happening is the Western rule of law countries pretty much set the standards. We built the internet, we had IPv4, we had IPv6, we kind of built a lot of the standards, the IETF. And a lot of those early companies, those innovative companies, the Suns and the HPs, and they just pretty much slowly stopped showing up to the standards bodies. So they were there in mass. There'd be 10 engineers from HP, and there'd be 10 people from Sun, and then there'd be 5 and 5, and then there'd be less from IBM, and then less from Microsoft, and pretty soon there's just a couple. And in about that time, there were 20 from Huawei and 30 from ZTE. And now you can just see, like, it's not really intentional. It was sort of competitive pressure. Just HP kind of had what it needed. It didn't need to send a lot of engineers anymore. But you wake up now, and who developed 5G, and why were all the engineers in China, and why were they all Chinese manufacturers? It's because they cared more, right? They put money where their mouth was. They sent, whether it was an industrial strategy from the government or a competitive strategy from the company, they just sent more people, right? And if you have a seat at the table where the decisions are being made, chances are the decisions will go more in your favor. And now, finally, we're starting to wake up to this. And that's what's causing some of this anxiety and sort of some of this tension. I also saw this when I was at ICANN. So ICANN has this multi-stakeholder model where they represent all these different groups. And that's in contrast to the United Nations model for the ITU, International Telecommunications Union. And the ITU is only made up of UN members. Now, they have an interesting model where they have to make a decision by consensus. It has to be unanimous consent for them to pass a rule. But they've been debating on and off about removing that. And China and Russia and some other countries are very active in the ITU. And you always hear them talking about wanting to move internet governance to the ITU. And generally it means that things will get slower and it'll give more operational freedom to countries like Russia and China. Right? China has a veto, Russia has a veto. But it's also a clever way of wrapping up internet governance and moving it away from the civilians and into the realm of only governments. Right? That's dangerous, especially from my perspective, from a rule of law perspective. And that has also been going on for a long time. That's a long game. That's a multi-decade strategy that's occurring right now in slow motion. And if you're an insider, you see it happening, and if you're an outsider, it's all new to you. Right? But there is this multi-decade kind of seismic shift that's been occurring. And when I was living in Washington, D.C. 5 years ago, I would have these conversations with people and I would say, why does the United States not have an industrial policy? Right? We're one of the only countries in the world that does not have an industrial policy. Is that intentional or is that sort of accidental? Like, why don't we? And the answers I'd get back from the White House and other people I talked to was essentially, well, we're America, sort of the dominant economic economy, and we don't need one. We don't have one. That's not American. We don't really do that. I'm like, yes, but if all of your frenemies are doing it, France and Germany and everybody else, they must be getting something out of it. Why aren't we doing it? Well, now you see with the tentative steps, the tiptoe steps, America is starting to have an industrial policy, but we're calling it something different. It is the White House strategy for 5G with Huawei. That was the beginning of a sort of a recognized policy. The State Department Clean Network Initiative, right? Clean pipes, clean telecom. You see more and more now restrictions on Russian or Chinese companies getting into the market. Right? We are beginning to have an industrial policy, but we're not calling it that. But don't be surprised, pretty soon the alignment of these three groups will force an industrial policy on the United States. Whether we want it or not, we're going to have one because it's a tool that we need to engage in this competition. And so I think that it's very important that there's this acknowledgement. Whether the government wants to or not, they're engaging in this. And this is an acknowledgement also that this is a different approach. The government has to take a different approach. The previous couple decades not cutting it. I'll tell you one quick story to sort of explain it. I don't think he's with the FBI anymore, but there was this guy, Bobby Flame. And Bobby Flame was like the sole representative for the US government that would show up at all these different standards bodies. He would be there at the IGF meeting. He'd be at the ICANN meeting, working with the law enforcement liaison group. He would show up sometimes at IETF meetings. It was like, and then Bobby would go back and he'd write all these reports and they'd go to all these different agencies and departments in the government. And it's like, Bobby had more air miles than anybody. He was always in the airport. And that was sort of our strategy as a country to engage on internet governance. Bobby Flame, right? Not terribly competitive when you compare it against other countries that have giant budgets and lots of people that have recognized internet governance or recognized internet competition as something strategic, and we're going after it. Now, finally, it sounds like this is starting to become recognized within our own government. And that's why I'm looking forward to the Secretary's comments, because I think it's going to take a different approach from government. What we tried in the past didn't work. I'll give you one other example. When the NTIA, the National Telecommunications something agency, did a transition with ICANN. ICANN used to be sort of under, the IANA functions were under the eyesight of NTIA, Department of Commerce, and then there was this transition, so now ICANN is free, the multi-stakeholder model, it's not beholden to the US government, it's not under the protection of the US government anymore, which has its own kind of complications. Well, when this transition was occurring, the US government was in the driver's seat. The US government could have said, you know what, we really want to do this but we want to make sure that you have a vision, ICANN community. So why don't you answer these 5 difficult questions for us? Go to your community and answer 5 of these whatever tough questions. Can a foreign country buy a root name server? Nobody knows. What happens if the root name server guy gets hit by a bus? Can he, in his will, transition the root server to somebody else? Well, nobody knows, right? And there were these difficult questions that nobody ever wanted asked. And the US government could have forced it. And they could have made the multi-stakeholder model become more transparent and grow up. But they didn't. Instead, they just let the transition occur. It's still, I think, ICANN still muddied with a lot of these half-answered questions that are then used against them by people who want to move governance into the ITU, right? We could have used it to enable, beat up the arguments, counter the arguments that the people at the ITU want, and really created a more open and transparent body that then we could use in this upcoming struggle. But that wasn't acknowledged that way. Opportunity lost. So now, with the acknowledgement happening, I'm really curious to see what is this government going to do? Right? They've lost a couple of opportunities. So let me tell you a little bit about the secretary, and then we'll kick off his remarks. Alejandro Mayorkas was born in Cuba, Havana, and shortly after the Cuban Revolution, his family fled to Florida, and later settled in California. He graduated from UC Berkeley in history with honors, and subsequently earned his JD from Loyola Marymount University in California. And then after law school, he went to work as an assistant United States attorney and was appointed the United States attorney for the Central District in California. So he professionally developed himself in California and in Los Angeles in particular during the administration of Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, where he oversaw the prosecution of high-profile criminal cases. And then in 2009 to 2013, he oversaw the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, USCIS. And then he was the Deputy Secretary of DHS from 2013 to 2016 under Jay Johnson. And that's where I got to meet and become friends with Ali. He was the Deputy Secretary, and he had a lot of cyber responsibilities. And I was on the Homeland Security Advisory Council, and so we would interact on different issues. And he ended up coming, the secretary, back then it was the deputy secretary, came to DEF CON 23, 6 years ago, and he gave a speech about the importance of building trust. A lot of what we heard from Jen Easterly this morning about how do you build trust between these communities. And so I'm interested to see if he touches on that key theme. And so I'd like to introduce the secretary's talk, and I'll be back afterwards. So take it away. Thank you, Alejandro. Sorry you couldn't be here in person.
Good afternoon. I'm very sorry that I'm not joining you in person. I was very much looking forward to being with you in Vegas again, including to stop by QueerCon and other events. But the unprecedented situation with respect to COVID-19 and the rising Delta variant prevents me from being there with you. I can assure you that if I was there in person, I wouldn't be dressed like I am now. As you know better than most, a lot has changed in the last 6 years. As it relates to the cybersecurity landscape, we've shifted from news headlines about data breaches and espionage to ransomware attacks disrupting hospitals, schools, food suppliers, and pipelines. The assaults on companies like Colonial Pipeline, JBS Foods, and Kaseya, not to mention interference in our elections, have reinforced the importance of cybersecurity, of how we govern the internet, and of why we need a free and secure cyberspace. What we face today is a need to put the big questions of our time into perspective. In order to do so, let me take you back for a moment, a couple hundred years. At a time long before the world could fathom the concept of computers, cyberspace, coding, hacking, or anything like it, let's turn to the early and mid-19th century when some of the most powerful nations on the planet engaged in what would later be known as the Great Game. This was an era when the competition for geopolitical influence pitted Great Britain against Russia and China over the question of who would control the vast land mass of Central Asia, who would determine the rules of the road for trade, travel, and commerce, and whose values and priorities would shape societies across the globe. The fight then was over land. Access to land led to control over people's lives, health, jobs, and well-being. And there was a divide between a deeply flawed yet aspiring democracy in Britain and the Tsars and dynasties who were focused on autocratic control over everything in their path, promoting and enforcing a closed, disconnected, and oppressive system. We could spend many hours discussing the legacy of this chapter in history, what it means for us now, what has changed, and what lessons we can and should glean from it. But here at Black Hat, I want to use this legacy as a jumping off point to discuss another great game that is playing out before us today and that will in fact dramatically shape our future. Although we're no longer fighting for control of land, we are competing for territory we cannot see. We are competing for the future of cyberspace, one in which friends gather, colleagues communicate, businesses sell, consumers buy, dissidents organize, horrific crimes occur, governments hear from their citizens, and information is widely and quickly disseminated. We are competing between two visions, one from countries like Russia, China, and Iran, who want to limit access and maximize control, and another from the United States and our allies who want to build and protect a free, open, and secure internet. We must ultimately confront some critical questions. Who will build, own, control, and operate the underlying infrastructure of the internet, extending from undersea cables to data centers? Who will shape the future of data routing? How will we protect both privacy and security online and offline? How will we better protect ourselves against continuously growing and quickly evolving cyber threats? Every day, the Department of Homeland Security tackles these issues, which are not limited to the great game that exists between democratic and authoritarian governments, as they also include the relationship between government and private sector entities. The role we play in this space may surprise many of you. Take the U.S. Secret Service, which is part of our department and responsible not only for protecting the president, but also actively fighting ransomware and a range of other cyber-enabled crimes. Or look at TSA, best known for protecting airport security, as so many of us know, that maintains regulatory authority over pipelines, which we leveraged following the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack to take urgent and critical measures to better protect against immediate cyber threats. Or consider the Coast Guard, which saves thousands of lives at sea every year and also protects the maritime transportation system against cyber threats. And last, look at the department's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, as it is commonly known, which is the federal government's quarterback on cybersecurity. CISA reinforces our cyber resilience and equips critical infrastructure owners and operators, cities and states, businesses and organizations of all sizes, and even hospitals and schools with the tools to defend against cyber attacks. Earlier today, you heard from Jen Easterly, CISA's new director, who talked about her journey from mastering the Rubik's Cube as a child to attending West Point, serving in Iraq and at Fort Meade, working as a senior leader at Morgan Stanley, and now serving at DHS to help us confront some of the most urgent challenges currently facing our country. Jen exemplifies the impressive talent we have brought together at DHS to work on cybersecurity and resilience. I'm particularly excited about the new Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative that CISA is launching to unite stakeholders from across the federal government and the private sector around a whole-of-nation approach to cyber defense operations. I have said before that the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, is fundamentally a department of partnerships. This collaborative is just one of many efforts underway designed to leverage our partners to keep our communities safe. We're really hard at work, and we have no illusions about the road ahead. There is nothing simple about the cybersecurity challenges we face, and we need your help to get this right. We need your expertise to inform our policies and the future of our critical mission. We invite you to share your views with us. We will not shy away from the most complex matters before us. In fact, we invite a fierce debate. Take, for example, data routing. There are open-ended questions we simply cannot ignore. Who will protect data as it travels around the world? Should the United States government take a more proactive role in shaping data flows, or do we leave that responsibility to the private sector? How can we ensure that American technology enterprises remain at the heart of the Internet's infrastructure across every layer, from the edge to the center, as we move forward? How will we set the rules? How will we balance the United States and our allies' priorities to create more openness and connectivity and freedom, while autocratic regimes like Russia and China are laying claim to greater control with zero transparency or accountability? These debates are necessary. The search for smart solutions is essential, and the demand for balanced, principled policies is unquestioned. At the Department of Homeland Security, we're dedicating considerable time, energy, and resources to carefully think through these complicated questions. And alongside our counterparts worldwide and in the private sector, we work to solve them. We would really benefit from your expertise, and we invite you to join the conversation. We cannot ignore an essential truth. We are all in this together. We must also acknowledge what we all know, which is that full agreement on every issue is impossible, and unanimity cannot be the measure of success or progress. The fact is, the strength of our democracy, the promotion of a free and open internet, the fairness of our economies, and the security of our communities is a shared responsibility that is more timely and more relevant than ever before. These ideals apply to what is happening in cyberspace, what is transpiring on the internet, and how we govern the digital sphere, where so much engagement, activism, advocacy, education, and economic activity occur today. The great game is playing out in cyberspace right now. I know that all of you love to work on tough problems. You're compelled to solve seemingly unsolvable puzzles. So here's the bottom line. We need your help. We cannot answer these questions alone, and we want you to join us in addressing them. There are two immediate ways you can get involved. First, come work with us at the Department of Homeland Security. Join our team of cybersecurity experts at CISA and the rest of DHS. Lead the charge on the inside and help us tackle growing challenges head on. I'm proud to announce that we're launching our new cyber talent management system in short order. This initiative, which is the product of a law enacted 7 years ago, will give us more flexibility to hire the very best cyber talent and ensure we can compete more effectively with the private sector. It's taken too long to get here, but we're proud to have gotten this hiring effort over the finish line. Developing a top-tier, diverse cybersecurity workforce will remain a priority for us at DHS and the federal government under the Biden-Harris administration. I cannot overstate the pride and sense of profound fulfillment one will have in joining our team. You can really do a lot here with us. Second, if you're not interested in working with us, you can help bridge the gap between the hacker community and the federal government. As our partners and experts in the field, you can be our defenders of a free, open, and secure internet, and you can help inspire the next generation of cyber talent too. Just a couple days ago, we kicked off a new partnership with Girl Scouts of the USA to provide girls with the tools and resources to learn more about cybersecurity and become active ambassadors for related best practices in their communities. We're increasing access to the field of cybersecurity across every level. We seek to draw on every ounce of talent and maximize the incredible potential that exists in communities across our country. We want every voice at the table. We need your creativity, your ideas, your boldness, and your willingness to push limits. We need you to help us navigate a path that has not yet been mapped. What's at stake here is nothing less than the future of the internet, the future of our economic and national security, and the future of our country. So let's keep this conversation going to protect our neighbors, our networks, our families, our rights, and ourselves. We have to work together. Let's do it, and thanks very much.
I hadn't watched that before. They just sent it in earlier this afternoon, so it's pretty interesting to watch, pretty inspiring. It's weird hearing a lot of your themes kind of echoed back toward you from a higher level. And so I'm looking forward to seeing where this conversation goes in our community and in policy circles. One thing you mentioned about 7 years ago about some of the hiring authorities, I just want to highlight. Back when I was on the HSAC, we did this task force called the Cyber Skills Task Force, and we were looking at all the cyber skills within the department and why people were advancing or not. And a lot of what we discovered, we put into recommendations, some of them were enacted and some of them were just impossible because of legislation. Well, that was 2012. Now, finally, with all these announcements that are coming out, it takes time, but almost a decade later, they're finally organizing in such a way that you can be compensated not by, you don't have to have a college degree, you have to pass the skills tests, right? That's what we were advocating for, skills-based evaluation. This is what they do in Customs and Border Patrol. They run you through real-life scenarios and see how you interact, and if you pass, then great, you can advance. This is, I think, this is what we were advocating for in the department. Don't take a test, don't need a CISP, whatever. Put them at a console and see if they can detect malware. Put them on the network and see what they discover. Reverse engineer a threat that was discovered from US CERT. Right? And then if they have the skills, great. Because what you can do then is you can test them at different levels and you can say, well, here's a question we didn't have an answer to. Are there too many people at the department at the lowest skill level? Are there too many people at the highest skill level? What's our mix of skills? Nobody can answer that. But if you start doing skill-based evaluation, you can say, guess what? We have all these fives and we have nobody at a low level. We need to start bringing in younger talent and training them up. Or it's the opposite. Everybody's low level and we don't have any seniors to teach the more advanced skills. Well, now, with these new hiring authorities, more ability to remote work, I hope that they can finally really get a handle on this. Because as you heard, right, there's a bigger game afoot. And that means they're going to have to do business differently or their lunch is going to get eaten. So I'm happy to advise them. I'm hoping people in this room get involved and provide advice. Because, like I said, it's internet problems or global problems. We're all in this together. So on that note, I really want to thank everybody in the room for coming to Vegas, having an adventure with us, and really trying this out. And then for those of you who are sticking around for DEF CON, the pool parties started at 1 o'clock. The DJs start, I think, at 6. Live music kicks off at 8. And it's just going to be a really fun, chill weekend. And I hear there's even some dunk tanks. Dunk your friends out at the pool. So, with that said, final closing notes. There, as I've said earlier, if you've got a pass, a badge, the videos, all the sessions will be available for the next month. You can log in and watch them, have your friends over, have a party, watch them. But also on that system, you can provide feedback. And because this is the first time we've really had a hybrid event, we're really curious on what worked for you and what did not work for you. So in the unfortunate event that we have to do this again next year, we're better at it. So please provide your feedback if you've got the time. If you're online watching the stream, go in and check out, give us some feedback. That would be great. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. See you next year.